So today's topic is Growing Healthy Colorado Kids, and it's an initiative of the Childhood Obesity Priority Area. Our speaker is Emily Bash, who is a nutrition specialist in the Early Childhood Obesity Prevention Unit at CDPHE. So welcome, Emily.
Thank you, Dina, and thank you all for joining us for the webinar today. And as Dina had mentioned, I represent the Early Childhood Obesity Prevention Unit at CDPHE, and I'll often refer to that unit as ECOP. We use a lot of acronyms in public health, and that's just one of the many that I'll be using frequently throughout this presentation. And today I would just like to go over with you the importance of healthy maternal weight, but not just for the health of the mother, but how healthy maternal weight affects the health of the child throughout the rest of their life as well. And I'll go through some Colorado data around maternal health, maternal weight, and some long-term effects of entering pregnancy at an unhealthy weight and gaining too much weight during pregnancy. I'll also share with you some of the strategies that we have through our ECOP unit to help you address healthy behaviors in early childhood. And we'll also discuss a little bit in depth some movement as a learning activity or a learning tool, and some modifications for children with special health care needs or adapted physical activity. And like Dina had mentioned in her introduction, I'd like to keep this presentation as open as we can for dialogue. So if you have any questions throughout, please don't hesitate to ask, and I may ask you some questions throughout as well. At the Colorado Health Department, and specifically with our ECOP unit, we take a health equity approach in all of the projects and all of the programs that we work on. We identify or understand that all people deserve to live healthy lives, but that barriers do exist. Even in Colorado, as being the healthiest or one of the healthiest states in the nation, there are certainly barriers to health in this state for certain economic groups and certain racial groups, and we will get into that a little bit in our presentation today as well. And we like to involve the community in all of our projects. One of our strategies is a consistent messaging campaign, and the community was very much involved in the development of the tools that we use for that consistent messaging campaign. So what are the predictors of early childhood obesity? There are many, and some even begin before the child is even born. Before the child is born, genetics can play a part in the child's weight throughout their life, whether the maternal smoking, this is just tobacco smoking. There's further research needed for marijuana smoking, but for tobacco smoking, and maternal diabetes is also another strong predictor of early childhood obesity, as well as maternal pre-pregnancy BMI. So if the mother is entering pregnancy with a higher BMI, then her children are likely to have childhood obesity, as well as excessive weight gain during pregnancy. And so there are recommendations and certain standards for women based on their pre-pregnancy BMI of how much weight they should gain during their pregnancy. And there are different recommendations for singleton pregnancies, or if you're having multiples as well. And so making sure women are gaining within the recommendations is a strong predictor of whether their child will be affected by an unhealthy weight in their life as well. And also paternal BMI can have an effect on the child's BMI as well. And at birth, a high birth weight can be a predictor of the child continuing to be at a higher weight for the rest of their life, as well as low birth weight or gender. And for low birth weight, the child may be born at a lower birth weight, but it puts them at risk of that catch-up growth. And we'll talk about later the child gaining too much weight early on in life, in the first 6 months or so. And also in early life, early introduction of solid foods. So I'd like to open up the conversation here and ask if any of you are familiar with when children should be introduced to solid foods. And you can either chat in the chat box or unmute your phones if anyone has any thoughts, or if anyone knows the recommendation for the introduction of solid foods. No responses? Okay, and so we've heard from many different people various suggestions of when children should be introduced to solid foods. We've heard, 6 months. Yes, 6 months, good. So we've heard anywhere from 4 months, 6 months, 8 months. So 6 months is the recommendation as long as they are developmentally ready for the introduction of solid foods. And there are certain developmental milestones that children can meet to be ready for solid foods. And also disparities, like I had mentioned a little bit earlier, certain low socioeconomic status and certain races are at a higher risk of early childhood obesity than others. And I can show, I'll show a graph a little bit later of some of those disparities that exist here in Colorado. But of course, this is not an all-encompassing list. You can imagine children with special healthcare needs may have additional limitations around mobility or low muscle tone that would put them at risk as well for childhood obesity, depending on what their limitations include. And within our early childhood obesity prevention unit, we take a maternal child health focus. And so we focus on anyone of childbearing age with viable ovary or viable eggs, which is represented by Lady Gaga in an egg costume, all the way through pregnancy, early infancy, and children up to age 5. So anyone that falls in that category, and also their families, the families of the young children are also our focus area for our work in the early childhood obesity prevention unit. And maternal obesity and maternal overweight prior to and during pregnancy can perpetuate the occurrence of obesity into the next generation. So we'll talk a little bit about the life cycle, how obesity and overweight affect the life cycle of the mother, and how also that has a multi-generational effect as well. And in Colorado, women are entering pregnancy at higher BMIs, and I'll go over some data that shows that, that increases their morbidity risk and their infant's risk of becoming overweight in their early childhood as well. And on average, women are retaining anywhere from 7 to 10 pounds per pregnancy over the life course. So if a woman has 3 children, that's 21 to 30 pounds that they're retaining for the rest of their life as a result of those pregnancies. And the prevalence of increasing BMIs is significantly greater for some racial and ethnic groups, and I will speak to that soon. And lower income populations often have fewer opportunities to engage or have less access to healthy eating and active living environments in the state. So our goal really is to encourage women to enter pregnancy at a healthy weight, to gain within those recommendations. Their gestational weight gain is appropriate for their pre-pregnancy BMI, and also depending on how many children they're having, if they're a singleton or if there are multiples. And decreasing the postpartum weight retention, so losing that weight that they have gained throughout pregnancy, and also avoiding the interpregnancy weight gain, so they're not gaining any additional weight in between those pregnancies that's not associated with a pregnancy. But as we know, that can be challenging, because once you have a baby, you're often focused all on the baby and the child and not so much focused on yourself. But part of our messaging campaign is really encouraging parents to be role models for their children and lead by example. And this graph represents Colorado birth certificate data, which is roughly 130,000 women every 2 years. And as you can see, we have a decrease in healthy weight from 55.5% to 53% over the course of the 4 years from 2011 to 2015. But at the same time, we're also seeing an increase in overweight and obese pre-pregnancy weights. So at the same time as our healthy weights are going down, our overweight and our obese rates are going up, as well as our underweights going down. And underweights can be concerning because the women aren't gaining enough weight or aren't gaining within the recommendation for pre-pregnancy or for gestational weight gain, and then their child may be born underweight, which can also be a predictor of early childhood obesity, because then they're at risk of that catch-up growth. And we like to represent the data from birth certificate data because it is often collected through electronic medical records and not self-reported. So it can be a little bit more accurate a representation of women's weights before pregnancy. And this graph represents national pre-pregnancy BMI increases from 2011 to 2014. And you can see Colorado is the blue color here, along with many of our neighboring states of Utah and Kansas, have all been experiencing a 6 to 10% increase in pre-pregnancy BMIs during that time span. And this represents 36 states and the District of Columbia, and every state has experienced an increase or no change or no data available. No state has experienced a decrease in pre-pregnancy BMI during this time frame. And this data is from the National Vital Statistics Report that was released in 2016. And as far as racial and ethnic groups go, in Colorado, we have differentiation between white, non-Hispanic, white Hispanics, or Black African Americans. And this data represents BMI rates of change from 2018 to 2015 of or 2008 to 2015 of pre-pregnancy BMIs. And as you can see highlighted in red here, Black and African Americans have the largest decrease in healthy weight, of a 12.5% decrease in healthy weight during that time frame, more than any of the other racial ethnic groups, as well as the largest increases in both overweight and obese. So during that time frame, Black African Americans experienced a 19.5% increase in pre-pregnancy BMIs, which is far greater than any of the other racial ethnic groups represented on this table. And what are the risk factors associated with entering pregnancy at an unhealthy weight or gaining too much weight during pregnancy? And so there are health risks associated with the pregnancy itself, along with risks that are associated with the child's development throughout their life as well. And so during pregnancy, women who are entering pregnancy at an unhealthy weight or gaining too much weight during pregnancy are at higher risk of gestational diabetes, hypertension, preeclampsia, and also at higher risk of having a cesarean delivery. And so we like to just explain that there are risks associated with the pregnancy itself for the mother, and also there are postpartum risks associated with the unhealthy weight gain as well. And some of those postpartum risks include that the mother are less likely to breastfeed, which means that both the mother and the child are not receiving those benefits of breastfeeding. And we know that breastfeeding is a predictor or a preventive factor for early childhood obesity. Also associated with lifelong obesity, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and postpartum depression. And these risks also carry over into the infants. So the infants are at increased risk of mortality during birth and beyond. Prematurity, if they're because the infant is then gaining too much weight and they're kind of running out of room in there. They're at an increased risk of stillbirth, congenital abnormalities, and macrosomia. And then that extends beyond into the child's health as well. And so then the child is at risk of excessive growth from birth to age 3 and lifelong chronic diseases, because since they have that rapid increase in weight early on in life, it's hard to change those behaviors that they've established throughout the beginning, the most important part of the child's life. And so not only do we have these this life cycle approach to obesity for the mother, but there's also this multi-generational impact. So the mother is gaining too much weight, which is putting the child at risk for early childhood obesity, or the infant possibly gaining too much weight early on in life, which then carries over to young childhood, adolescence, and then into their adult life as well. And so it's just that perpetuating that cycle and perpetuating that intergenerational impact of obesity throughout the family. And rapid increases in the first 6 months of life are associated with increased risks of obesity at age 3. And then if the child is overweight or obese at 18 months, then they're 2 times more likely to be obese at age 4 to 6, which then carries over into adolescence. If they're 60% of overweight preschoolers then remain overweight at age 12. And then 84% of obese children become obese adults, and 100% of severely obese children become obese adults. So that cycle is just perpetuating over and over again. And this graph shows Colorado WIC data. And WIC is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program for women, infants, and children. And this data represents obesity rates for participants age 2 to 4 and across the country. And so you can see Colorado is doing fairly well. For our obesity rates are in the 0 to 9.9%, along with our neighboring states of Wyoming and Utah. But there are certainly others like Virginia that is at the 20 to 25% range. And so it really varies across the country, but relatively high rates of obesity amongst the 2 to 4-year-olds in WIC population. But there is good news. In Colorado, our childhood overweight and obesity rates have been going down since 2012. This graph shows obesity rates from 2012 to 2017, going from about 23% to kind of stabling off in 2016 and 2017 around 20%. And so we want to really be cautious of this stabilization. And is it because our maternal rates, our maternal pre-pregnancy weights are going up? And that's what's causing this stability in our childhood obesity rates around 20%. So it's just something that we're mindful of at the health department of why this may be happening. And is this a future trend, or is this just this one between these 2 years? And then in 2018, we'll see it further declining again. And as far as racial and ethnic disparities in Colorado go, this also represents WIC data for children aged 2 to 4. And the green line represents what we term as overobese, which is overweight and obese combined. And if you can see from the graph, the largest rates of overweight and obese are within the Hispanic population of Colorado, followed by the American Indian, Alaska Native. And so we need to be considerate or understanding of some of the cultural aspects and some kind of traditional practices that may exist in some of these cultures that may have an influence or an effect on their child's obesity rates within those ethnic groups in Colorado. So before I move into kind of our strategies at the State Health Department, does anyone have any questions on the data that I had shared, or any questions around the influence of maternal weight on childhood weight? And feel free to unmute your phones if you have any comments, or chat in the chat box. Nothing. Okay. And so I just wanted to go over with you our ECOP strategies at our health department. We have 3 generic strategies that our work kind of falls into, 3 buckets. And the first being breastfeeding. So we do a lot of focus on promoting breastfeeding in the workplace, promoting breastfeeding in childcare, and promoting the baby-friendly hospital initiative, which really helps set up parents from day one with breastfeeding best practices to really get them and their babies the best start that they can as far as breastfeeding goes. And we represent the Baby Friendly Hospital Collaborative, which represents, there are now 13 baby-friendly hospitals that have received designation in Colorado, which represents 31% of all live births in the state. And our goal is to get to, 15% and then, or 50% of live births in a baby-friendly hospital in the next 5 years. So we're always working on recruiting and educating hospitals and hospital systems on the benefits of being baby-friendly designated. We also, Is there a question?
Next.
Sorry.
Next. Can you hear me in the room? Okay.
Yes, there we go.
So next Wednesday, same time, same place, we're doing a follow-up webinar on breastfeeding. So
Yes.
if you haven't registered for that, you might want to look into that.
Great. Yes, and she'll go in much more detail than I'm going over. I'm just kind of giving the brief highlights of our breastfeeding work at the state, but Stacy Miller, our breastfeeding coordinator, will be going into much more detail. I just wanted to share with you a couple strategies and a couple initiatives that we have at the state. So in addition to hospitals, we work a lot with childcare and early care and education, and we promote breastfeeding-friendly childcare environments, both for the infants in the care and maybe also the staff who are providing care who may have their own infants and be breastfeeding themselves. And so I brought a couple examples of some of our toolkits we have. We have two toolkits, one for child care center professionals and one for child care home professionals, because the language is a little bit different between the two, but really talks about breastfeeding best practices, paced bottle feeding, storage and handling, and anything and everything you could possibly need to know about breastfeeding in childcare to really help parents continue their breastfeeding goals, because we've often heard that one of the biggest barriers to continuing your breastfeeding is returning to work and finding appropriate childcare and supportive childcare to continue breastfeeding. And we also have a toolkit tips for starting your breastfed baby in childcare for parents, so they can understand from the childcare provider's perspective of how much milk they need to provide each day, and tips like that. And we also provide education or training and resources for lactation accommodation in the workplace. So it is state and federal law to allow mothers to time and space within their workplace to continue breastfeeding or pump while they're at work. And so that's just a couple of the resources. And like she said, Stacy will be speaking more to that in her presentation next week. But we know there is a really high breastfeeding initiation rate in Colorado. 9 out of 10 moms start breastfeeding in the hospital from day one. But there's all these spheres of influence where they can have barriers or struggles to continue breastfeeding, as our duration rates tend to fall off after 3 months and then fall even further after 6 months. And so you may kind of look at this graph and these spheres of influence and see what role you can play in supporting moms to continue breastfeeding, and where you fall within the sphere, and how far away or how far removed from the mother and baby you may be. And so if you look at those that are the closest to the parents or the mother and the baby are other mothers, so breastfeeding peers, friends, family, and coworkers, and then followed by child care providers, which is our target population for helping them support breastfeeding, because they're so closely tied to the mother and the baby and helping support them. Yep.
So one of our web participants wants to know, is there any number of employees required to get workplace time off or undue hardship for the employer if they get time to pump?
I believe in Colorado it's 1 or more employees. If you have 1 or more employees, they are required to accommodate. And it's not necessarily paid time off. I believe it's just time during the day. It could be a break, unpaid break, to take to go and pump while they're there. But again, Stacy will speak more to that in her presentation. Any other questions on breastfeeding? So we're going to move to our second strategy. Okay, now our second strategy is a consistent messaging campaign. And our consistent messaging campaign addresses 8 evidence-based behavioral factors that have been found most promising in preventing obesity in early childhood. They've all been audience tested. Like in my first slide, we like to involve the community in the development of our programs and our materials, and the community was very highly involved in the development of all of these materials that I'm going to share with you. And this campaign was developed as a way to maximize our education and messaging efforts in the community. And our messaging campaign is called Speaking with One Voice, 9 Ways to Grow Healthy Colorado Kids. And why is it important? It's important because, as we know, new mothers are very receptive to new information. And they're hearing it from all those spheres of influence, not just for breastfeeding, but for parenting in general. They're hearing from their neighbors, from their parents, from their aunts and uncles, from their coworkers, their colleagues, from celebrities, from social media, anywhere and everywhere that information is being shared. They're hearing, you should do this about sleeping, or your baby needs to eat this much, or are you still breastfeeding? And so we certainly don't want to confuse new parents on what the best practices are. So we are really trying to provide consistent, evidence-based information to new parents throughout all of these avenues, through social media, through their care providers, through friends and family, or other organizations that they may be visiting as a family. I mean, I can speak to this myself. I'm about almost 5 months pregnant, and I have heard from anyone and everyone all the things I need to buy, all the things I need to get, and all the things I need to prepare for. And you're just consulting Dr. Google every day about what you should be doing, and it becomes overwhelming. And so we don't want to overwhelm new mothers, because they really should be focusing on their own health, their own safety, and the baby's safety as well. And so our messaging is really a tool to help them kind of sift through and sort through all of that information that they may be receiving from everyone. And a recent study showed that nearly 1 in 6 ads for children's products use images that clash with the American Academy of Pediatric recommendations. And so we certainly don't want to confuse new families with conflicting information, and we want them to have the most accurate and up-to-date information that's available to us that we can share with them. And so through this messaging campaign, we are all speaking with one voice, all of those different avenues of anyone who can influence the behaviors of pregnant women, our families up to age 5. Those are our focus areas and our target organizations to share these messages with. And so by increasing the visibility and repetition of our messages, we can collectively make a greater impact for Colorado children. And so that's what our overall goal is that they see these messages in every different kind of setting that they may be in. And then the repetition or the visibility of those messages eventually, we hope, result in behavior change. And so I'm going to go through each of our 9 messages. I broke them up into groups of 3, kind of based on themes. And the first group of 3 are messages that are really targeted to the parents around healthy eating and active living during pregnancy that we had talked on. Also gaining the right amount of weight during pregnancy based on your pre-pregnancy BMI. And also that parents have the parent power to lead by example and to really set forth those healthy behaviors early in childhood so that their children are following those behaviors. And as you can see, the English messages are on one side and Spanish are in the other. And we involve the community in developing the messages themselves, the layout of the images, and the women or the people depicted in the images as well. And so you can see a slight differences between the English and the Spanish versions of each message, just because we wanted to use images that would really resonate with that population. We didn't want to provide materials to, for example, the Spanish population that wouldn't resonate with them. We really wanted them to have messages that came from similar population as themselves. And the wording on the English and Spanish messages are a little bit different, although the overall message itself is very similar. For example, there's no power like parent power in the English version. Doesn't really translate the same in Spanish. And so the Spanish version is, you are the best example. So the overall message is still the same. It's just the wording may be a little bit different. And also on the back of each of the messages, the handout version is a little bit more information or tips on the back that families can refer to for each of the different topic areas. And the next set of 3 messages are targeted around nutrition. So giving you and your baby the benefits of breastfeeding, trusting your baby knows how much to eat. So recognizing those hunger and fullness cues that babies that are all born with. And so often we hear the baby needs to finish the jar, the baby needs to finish the bottle, which really kind of goes against their natural born instincts to tell the care provider that they're full or that they no longer want anymore. But being in tune with those hunger and fullness cues can really be beneficial throughout their whole lifetime, because then it really prevents overeating in the future as they become older children and adults. So on the back of the handout for hunger cues, it talks about what some of those hunger cues, or hunger and fullness cues are, to know when the baby may not want any more food. And also rethink your drink, choose water. And there's been a lot of work in the Colorado area, a metro area, around healthy beverage promotion and consumption of water. And as you can see, again, between the English and Spanish versions, the images may be a little bit different, although the message is overall the same. And for example, things that rhyme, like rethink your drink, doesn't necessarily translate the same in Spanish. So the Spanish message is feel thirsty, drink water. And the next set of 3 messages are around behaviors. So we have one around safe sleep and removing the TV from the sleep space, giving your child nutritious food and active play, and also turn off the TV and play together as a family. And so it's been increasingly prevalent that tablets and phones and computers and those sort of things are taking a larger role in children's lives. So really encouraging families to play together without the screen time is another one of our messages. And again, with the English and Spanish, the images are a little bit different depending on the target population. And so at our ECOP unit, our role is to present these messages and materials that we have created to partners such as yourselves. We engage in social media and marketing. We provide newsletter articles for other organizations. We have exhibit tables at conferences as a way to share our messages and materials with everyone, in hopes that the partner organizations such as yourselves or childcare providers, libraries have been a good partner recently, healthcare clinics, WIC clinics, then share those messages with the parents and the caregivers and the pregnant moms. So having this relationship and this dialogue is hugely important for us, because we really rely on you all to share the message with the end user of the parents and the families, because we're a little bit disconnected from that group. So we really appreciate having this opportunity to share these messages with all of you. Yeah.
So if we wanted to order some of the packets, will you be telling us how to do that?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I will get to our order form here in just 1 second. So some of the various partners we've worked with, our local public health agencies have been a huge partner, particularly WIC clinics. They use our handouts as educational materials during their counseling sessions. We've been working with libraries. We have a conference coming up in September, the Colorado Association of Libraries annual conference that we'll be presenting at. We, again, work with a lot of child care centers and early care and education, both in homes and centers. Home visitation programs, I just presented last week to the Parents as Teachers Conference. Early childhood councils, family resource centers, schools, health clinics, hospitals, any organization that has any influence or any contact with our target population, we try to reach out to, and we try to form some type of relationship with and share our materials with them and our resources with them. And so they're using the messages in various ways. We have, in addition to our handout size messaging, we have a poster size material that for each one of the 9 messages that have been used in lobbies or waiting areas, because they're a little bit larger, and bulletin boards. Our materials have been added to new welcome bags or event registration bags, parenting support groups, even Biggest Loser competition. So really the messages can be versatile enough that they can be used anywhere. In 2017, so just last year, at the end of last year, we had released a messaging awareness campaign, and we sent it to, I think, 10 or 12,000 different recipients of the WIC program and other organizations who have ordered our messaging material in hopes to measure whether they were familiar with the message itself, and as a result of hearing or seeing the message, has it resulted in any type of behavior change. And so there are over 1,700 responses to this messaging awareness survey, and it measured the awareness of the message. So we asked for each of the 9 different messages, have you seen this message? Yes or no? And as a result of seeing or hearing this message, what did you do? And so the 2 most popular or most seen or heard message in both English and Spanish surveys were give yourself and your baby the benefits of breastfeeding and rethink your drink, choose water. And like I said, there's been a lot of work in and around Colorado and the metro area really promoting breastfeeding in the workplace, promoting breastfeeding in childcare, and also campaigns around rethink your drink and choosing water. So maybe they didn't necessarily see our particular image or our particular message, but they heard the information from one of our other partners who are doing work around these 2 areas as well. And then we had asked for the behavior change question, what did you do as a result? And the options were nothing really, I thought about it, or I made a change. And the 3 most chosen responses for I made a change for the English survey were turn off the TV and play together as a family, rethink your drink, and the 5210. And now 5210 is not one of our messages. It's a national healthy messaging campaign, but it's very popular, and a lot of organizations in Colorado use that messaging material. So we wanted to ask if they had seen or were familiar with that message as well. And it talks about some of the same things that our messaging covers as well, like 0 sugary drinks, more water, and low-fat milk. So it kind of aligns with our rethink your drink message. And so if for the English populations, those were the top 3 responses. And in Spanish, it was choose healthy food and nutritious food and physical activity for you and your family. Also, the rethink your drink message, and help your child sleep in a TV-free space. And so there was some consistency with the screen time, both with sleeping and with turning off the TV and playing together as a family. And also the rethink your drink, choosing water. And some of the messaging with the 5210 campaign is very similar to choosing nutritious food and physical activity. They're very similar amongst the 2 English and Spanish subpopulations. And the least familiar message was there's no power like parent power. And so we're really working with parents or with organizations who work with parents to really encourage them to practice healthy behaviors, because their children just follow what they do, follow their lead, follow their example. And in those early stages of life, they just want to do whatever their parents are doing. And so if they see mom drinking a soda, they're going to want to drink a soda too. They're going to want to eat whatever mom is eating and just be parents' shadow pretty much for the first couple of years of their life. So we really want to empower parents to invest in their own health to improve outcomes for their children. And so back to the question of ordering materials and where do we get the materials. So all of our materials are free in print form, and we'll ship them anywhere in Colorado for free as well. And so we have posters and handouts, newsletter templates, social media toolkits that has sample Facebook, Pinterest, and Twitter posts that use our messages. And all of these materials can be found by Googling One Stop ECOP Shop. And from that link on Google, there will be a link to 9 ways to grow healthy Colorado kids. And through that link will be an electronic order form. And all of our materials are available via the electronic order form. And they come directly to me, and I put the orders together and send them out. Does anyone have any questions on the healthy messaging campaign? We are going to move to the next strategy. If not, okay. All right, so our next strategy is encouraging healthy behaviors in early childcare and education settings. So we do a lot of training and coaching and provide resources to childcare staff around structured physical activity or structured physical play in early care settings. Also around healthy eating, responsive feeding, and screen time in those early care and education settings. So that can be both child care centers or child care home providers. And physical activity benefits go well beyond obesity prevention. That's just one of the many benefits of kids, allowing kids to be physically active or engaging in physical play in the classroom or childcare setting. And so physical play helps them develop their motor skills, builds strength and flexibility, endurance, develops and maintains their strong bones, improves social skills and brain development, which then leads to creativity, helps build their self-confidence once they begin to get better at these activities. It reduces stress and depression for the children themselves, improves their sleep, and also children who are able to be active during the day have fewer behavioral and disciplinary problems later on. And so there are many ways to incorporate active play in these type of early care settings. These are just a couple of them. Structured physical activity or teacher-led activity is when the teacher or caregiver or care provider leads developmentally appropriate, fun, planned activities that involve all children at their skill level. And this can be incorporated through music. It can be an obstacle course. So there's various different ways to incorporate structured physical activity. Like if you think of the hokey pokey is a structured type of physical activity. What's important about structured activity is that the teachers or the care providers are also participating in the activity. So they first model the activity or explain the activity to the children, then demonstrate it, and then they participate or do it with them. And so it encourages participation of the other students, but also affects the health of the care providers too, because then they get to be physically active or engaging in active play and movement with the children as well. Free play or unstructured physical activity is also an important component of physical or active play in early care and education settings, because it helps foster creativity and allow the children to develop their imagination and dexterity, and enhances their social skills, because during this free play time is when they kind of create their own games, or they may approach another child in the setting to play with them. So it encourages them to be more social and be free thinkers about how they want to use that time. Gross motor skills are those that involve large muscle groups like arms and legs, which can incorporate many different activities. And moderate to vigorous physical activities are those that increase the heart rate a little bit. And so moderate activities can be those that increase the heart rate, elevate the heart rate a little bit, but the child is still able to speak or have a conversation while they're engaging in that activity. And vigorous activities can be those where the heart rate is elevated to a pretty high level where they're not able to speak over it. So if they're running, they can't really be talking and engaging with other students or providers while they're running. And so there are many ways to combine a lot of these different activities. So you can have moderate to vigorous, unstructured or free play, but we like to encourage moderate to vigorous structured activities, so that they're getting the benefits of their elevated heart rate for their health, and also the structured activities that the teachers are participating in as well. And so that's the kind of training that we provide to child care providers, often through a program called I Am Moving, I Am Learning, which incorporates music as a way to increase both the moderate to vigorous physical activities and the structured activity component as well. And in general, all preschoolers should participate in 2 to 3 occasions of active play per 8-hour day in childcare. And that includes 2 structured activities or games that promote movement. And they should have continuous opportunity to develop and practice age-appropriate movement skills, and ample time to do MVPA. In general, toddlers should have 60 to 90 minutes of MVPA per 8-hour day of childcare, and preschoolers should have 90 to 120 minutes of MVPA per 8-hour day in care. And the caregivers, we really like to promote caregivers' participation in activities as well. So they facilitate the participation by participating themselves and encourage participation of the children in the activity. Make it happen anywhere, so it can be in the classroom setting, in the home setting, outside in the playground, and even those transition times from maybe one activity to another in the childcare setting, or if they're taking a bathroom break and walking down the hall, they can be working on tiptoeing or hopping or bouncing or other types of activities as a way of transitioning from one activity or event to another. And really working on that repetition. So as kids repeat these activities and repeat these movements in various ways, they build their skill level, which then helps build their confidence. And changing the activities. So you don't want to just keep the activities the same every day. You can use movement as a way to encourage activity, but maybe switching up the songs a little bit. You don't want to have the same type of song every time or the same obstacle course every time, so that they get to develop additional skills or additional abilities that are incorporated in those different types of activities. And during these activities, they can the caregivers can integrate school readiness skills, so math and reading, letter recognition, color recognition can all be incorporated in these types of activities, motor skills for development, and they can also include music and nutrition and various other components into these active play times. As we know, there are some children that may need additional help communicating, understanding instructions, attending to tasks, sharing and getting along with others, or even increasing or decreasing the level of activity. And so there are various ways to adapt physical activities, but it's important to include all children at an early age, because this is really the most important time when attitudes are being formed in young children. And children can learn acceptance of others who may be different by including everyone and not segregating or separating out children of different abilities. So really encouraging peer-to-peer engagement and peer support so that children can have a more inclusive environment in their childcare setting. And the Action for Healthy Kids has outlined a 5-step plan for adaptive physical activity. And first, it's important to include safety for all children, not just children with special healthcare needs, but really starting with safety and checking the needs of the children with special healthcare needs in your program and becoming really familiar with what those needs may be, and adapting activities to promote safety for all children. Next, integration of wellness. So consider how wellness activities can support the overall education plan for each child, which wellness activities can be easily integrated into the day, and that will support the health and encourage supportive learning environments. Make the connection. So it's also important to connect children to each other. So you want to connect children with other children, both with maybe similar or varying levels of needs, or some that may not have special healthcare needs, so that they can work together and encourage that inclusiveness in the program. But also connecting them to other personnel or parents who may have other additional insights that they can help the child reach their general education needs, as well as specific lifestyle activities. Increased participation, so focus on abilities versus disabilities, and consider how the child can participate at the highest level possible to learn developmentally appropriate content. And this may require various adaptations, which I'll go through in the next slide. But there can be adaptations to the activity itself, to the equipment that you're using, to the rules and regulations around the activity. And promoting healthy lifestyles. Consider how to instill messaging about healthy lifestyles and assist children to increase capacity for making positive choices, even when physical skills may be limited. And this is how children learn to enjoy greater inclusion and interaction with their peers. And so some examples of adapting physical activity to include all children can be altering speed and duration, space and equipment used. For example, you can slow the game down. If you have a fast game of basketball going on, you can slow the game down in the speed so that children who may have limited mobility can keep up with the pace of the game. Reducing the duration of the game. If a game or an activity normally lasts 30 minutes, maybe breaking it down into 10-minute segments, 3 10-minute segments. Using a smaller play area can be helpful, and using different kinds of balls that are easier to hold or throw or see. So there may be various balls out there that have bells in them. So for children with hearing impairments, maybe still be able to participate in the activity because they can kind of follow where the ball is and locate the ball. Various balls that may light up so that children with vision impairments can still see them, or bright colored balls so children with vision impairments can still participate and be able to follow or locate the ball itself. Wiffle balls and Nerf balls tend to be lighter and not travel as fast or as far, so it can make catching or can reduce the fear of being hit by one of those types of balls. You can also adjust the rules that increase incentives to include every team member. And so that could be, for example, when you're taking the field in baseball, making sure that every player has a position, an appropriate position, and you're not putting a child with special health care needs way out in the outfield somewhere who we know that no one's going to hit a ball in that direction. So really encouraging incentives to include everyone in the activity. Providing peers to help participate in the activities, and it really helps encourage that social connection and that acceptance of people who may have different abilities than yourselves. And also asking students to help create the activities. So, because they are best at knowing what their skill and ability levels are. So asking them to help create a new game or adjust the rules or regulations or the equipment that you're using so that they all can participate. Adult aids may be available to help children with special health care needs, but peer helpers can often encourage students to be more fully engaged in the activity. And there are also more ideas at a website called PE Central, and they have a link to adapted physical activity that talks about different activities themselves and equipment. You can order equipment through their website, or they have ideas of how to modify equipment that you might already have. And so now I just wanted to share with you a short video of adapted physical activity in an early care setting. The video was a winning video from the 2016 Let's Move Active Schools Inclusive Physical Education and Physical Activity video contest. And it was a part of the Partnership for Healthier America. And so throughout this video, you'll see various examples that we had talked about of adapted equipment, peer inclusion, and adapted activities and regulations. So if you can see here, this boy is playing with a ball that is flat on one side, so it's easier for him to control that ball and dictate where it is going. And this little girl here is standing on footprints that kind of teach her where to keep her feet and standing and skating soccer ball back and forth. With another peer who may or may not have similar health care needs. Seeing the ball that is flat on one side. And you can see there are children just playing overweight who seem to be necessarily structured physical activity, but there isn't any type of segregation. So these boys are teaching parents how to play this particular game. ball, or whatever the that source has. Looks like it's wrapped with some type of fabric. So that's why I had to help you today. So I had to take it out. These stars on the floor are sort of where to stand. They certainly can be moved closer or further away, depending on the strengths and abilities of the children participating. Go ahead, Sammy. Hey, go get your ball. Go get out your hands too. This is a very large ball that used to help maintain control. Does anyone have any other thoughts on the video? There we go. Display settings. All right. Does anyone have any thoughts on the video or anything else they noticed that I hadn't pointed out? And feel free to unmute your phones or type in the chat box if you noticed anything that really stuck out for you. No? Quiet group today. That's fine. I just really like that video because it really showed various ways to adapt the physical activities or the games they were playing, and really highlighted the inclusiveness of the peer-to-peer sport of all of the different games and activities that were going on at this school. And I just wanted to provide an additional example of a way to adapt baseball. So baseball can be adapted in many different ways by using a larger or smaller bat. Oftentimes smaller handled bats or rackets are easier to control and easier to make a contact with whatever ball or game you're playing. Using Velcro balls or mitts is another way to adapt the ability to catch the ball as it's coming at you. Using a tee, moving the bases and the pitcher's mound closer so that you're making the field of play a little bit smaller. Using a larger ball or using a wiffle ball or a ball that doesn't travel so hard as a baseball, or a ball that's a different color so it's easier to see as it's being hit or being thrown. Counting to 10 before tagging out the next person, or having players without any disability playing, or with and without disabilities playing at the regular depth and defense. So you don't want, if you have a child with a special health care needs coming up to bat, the last thing you want to see are the outfielders moving in, because you know, or they suspect that they're not going to be able to hit it that far. And so as a way to keep the game fair, having players stand at the appropriate distance as they would for any other player who is coming up to bat. So I just wanted to provide an additional example. And on PE Central, they have various other examples of how to modify volleyball or football or soccer, all the other different team-like sports and activities through their website. So in general, some general teaching strategies for children with special health care needs, and even young children, to simplify the instructions in the equipment. So really avoiding, if you can, multi-step approaches, because it's oftentimes hard for them to remember one step to the next. So keeping the instructions or the games as simple as you can. Giving visual, oral, and kinesthetic cues. that repetition that we had talked about before to help build their skills, build their confidence in themselves, and also role modeling for not only the teachers, but also the other peers who may not have special healthcare needs, really being advocates for those that do, and incorporating that inclusiveness of all children, using various different types of communication systems, depending on the child and their specific needs, and eliminating elimination games, because that really hinders the inclusiveness of the activity, because those children with special healthcare needs can often be the first ones eliminated from any game and often be the last ones picked for any team. So if we can avoid those types of activities, would be best for this group. And that is all I had to share today. I'm open to questions or comments if anyone has them, if you want to type them in the chat box or unmute your phones. No questions? Well, I just wanted to leave with my contact information. My email address is here on this slide. You can also find our resources by Googling the One Stop ECOP shop, and our link to the 9 Ways to Grow Healthy Colorado Kids to order any of our materials that will be shipped to you for free anywhere in Colorado. If you have any other additional questions, certainly I'm open to field those. And if I don't know or not familiar with the information, I will certainly find out someone who is. And I hope you all join Stacy's webinar next week on breastfeeding, as she'll go into much more detail than I did today. So if there aren't any questions, okay, we'll end there. Thank you.